Hi, this is Weston from the future, or rather more recent past. This will be old by a few years when posted, even more depending on when you see it. Almost all of the following information is outdated. Keep that in mind when watching. I hope you'll enjoy this regardless. Thanks. Hi guys, Weston here. Since I've spent a large part of the last 3 months playing Awesomenauts, I figured I might as well post a video summing up my discoveries. This video is not really a let's play, a review, nor an in-depth strategy guide, but it has two distinct purposes. First of all, it provides enough superficial yet comprehensive background information for people to be able to enjoy any future videos of this game I might post. And secondly, it might push some people over the edge and help them decide that this is something they'd wish to play. I'm almost certain all the information provided here is available in one place or another already, but I'm merely trying to aggregate it. At the same time showing off some footage I've accumulated over time. At its core, Awesomenauts is a MOBA game, which stands for Multiplayer Online Battle Arena, and is a young but well-established genre with plenty of both tournament and casual players across a handful of usually well-known titles. The basic idea is fairly simple. A world is placed in equilibrium, where tiny minions or robots set out from two opposite sides, traveling a given number of roads and collide in the middle, killing each other, as long as there's no outside interference. And then the process is repeated infinitely, where a group of bots to overcome the other one with some outside help. They would reach a tower or a turret, deal a tiny bit of damage to it, and then evaporate under its heavy firepower. Of course, all of this sounds like an exercise in futility, and that is why such a world desperately needs people to upset the balance. This is where you come in. Players take on roles as powerful heroes, as they are most commonly referred to, and try to kill the enemy bots so that the bots can attack the turrets, so that the turrets can be destroyed, so that they can reach the heart of the enemy base, so they can destroy it and win a given match. Of course, the other team is trying to achieve the same goal, but from the opposite side. I believe the above to be essential components of a MOBA game, with all the philosophical burdens essentialism brings. Now, the nitty-gritty details, how a given game gets its unique identity that distinguishes it from being merely a member of a given kind, to use Aristotelian metaphysics. Awesomenauts is a curious title that above all else tries to be approachable. Everything about this game is tailored for this purpose. It is not presented from an isometric view, but is two-dimensional, so one base is on the left, the other is on the right, and there is a certain amount of platforming you can do to get to different elevations within a level, but ultimately you need to deal with gravity to achieve that. The resulting movement dynamic isn't really impoverished, but it is as simple to grasp as it gets. You don't get an overwhelming amount of weapons and abilities either. Every character gets a single attack and 2 skills. There are no potions, no usable items, nothing. They move and jump a bit differently and have various quantities of health, but all of it is really easy to wrap your head around. Well, what about gaining power, you might ask? There has to be a mechanic for that, right? Well, there is, but you don't even get the distinction between money and experience, abilities and items. There is a single currency called Solar that you can gather from the map or gain through killing bots and enemies. And you get a number above your head that indicates how many full hundreds of it you have gained over the course of a given match. You can of course spend that to improve your stats. How many choices do you get? 12. Before a given match starts, you get to choose 3 out of 6 upgrades for, accordingly, your physical condition, basic attack, primary, and secondary abilities. 12 things overall, some with up to 3 consecutive levels of getting more awesome, but that's it. You gain Solar throughout the course of a given match, you spend it at your base to improve your character. Even having access to the first 2 abilities needs to be bought first, and you can postpone that as long as you wish if that's what you're into. The maps are relatively small, so you will not get lost, and the matches do not last all that long, about 20 minutes on average, I would say. With 3 players on each team instead of the standard 5 versus 5, this small field can get surprisingly crowded. Another interesting mechanic is the teleport, of which you get an unlimited amount and which sends you back to your base, so you don't have to trek all the way back there to buy upgrades or heal up in case there isn't any healing around. Any damage received will cancel your teleportation, so you need to be smart about it, but even more importantly, there will inevitably be a conflict of interests. If you are crushing your enemies, You'll want to keep that pressure going, push the advantage further, and teleporting away means giving them some room to breathe. If the situation is even, you'll allow them to swing a decisive blow. If there's suddenly 2 people fighting their group of 3, that's a 50% more numerous group for your team to face. Finally, if you are losing and are desperately trying to defend that turret, kill the bots and do everything in your power to fend them off, you are all the more needed right there and then. Teleporting away may seal your fate, and even though you will come back stronger, you will have lost some of the momentum in the process. Of course, in my experience, it is almost always better to let that turret fall than to die defending it and let it fall anyway 5 seconds later. There are 3 different maps and, more importantly, 10 unique heroes so far. Each with not only a different look, role and set of abilities, but also a different tune, which plays when you get a killing spree, that is, accumulate 3 kills without dying yourself. Although it may not sound like much, the gratification of hearing that sweet music and the announcer spitting his lungs out over how badass you are can be exhilarating, especially after a well-executed string of offensive maneuvers. Oh, one last innovation that bears mentioning are the drop pods, which transport you down into the battlefield at the beginning of each match and every time you die, taking longer and longer to spit you out as your character becomes more powerful. They also a great lag deterrent, since each match can be a little unstable at the start, but by the time you hit the ground, the issues will almost always be gone. Oh, and creeps. There are 2 kinds of them: the defenseless ones, which give you health and a little solar when killed, and a fat solar boss, which is a high risk, high reward sort of deal. For reasons unknown, I happen to be one of few people obsessing over repeatedly getting rid of him. Now, let me introduce the titular Awesomenauts for you in order of appearance on the menu bar. There's Clunk, Froggy G, Yuri, Sheriff Lone Star, Volta the Omniscient, Leon the Chameleon, Derpul Zork, Coconebulian, Gnaw, and Skuldir. I will now go through each of them and elaborate a bit on what they can do and how they operate on the field of battle. Let's start with Clunk.
Clunk all wound up and ready to go.
On the surface, Clunk is a giant robot that likes heavy metal, is extremely aggressive and towers over other combatants. When facing a superior enemy playing as Clunk, what you see is an indestructible mountain of metal, a hulking behemoth slowly yet inevitably making its way towards you. Clunk's health is massive and allows him to brush off all but the most powerful and sustained attacks. Conversely, his speed is pretty abysmal and his jetpack runs out fast, though it recharges at an acceptable rate. His weapon of choice is a rocket launcher, mounted as his arm. There is a pronounced pause between each missile fire, then they fly slowly towards the closest target, adjusting their angle slightly so they are homing missiles. His first ability is succinctly called Bite. It deals damage to a single enemy and gives Clunk back a fraction of it as health. Please note that the ability to ensnare enemies requires a specific, if popular, upgrade to Bite, and is not something the vanilla ability does. That being said, it's awesome. As you can clearly see. His second ability is Self-Destruct, with which he can deal massive area damage to enemies while suffering some of it himself. When you think about it, he is a slow-moving, slow-firing, inaccurate, high-damage hunk of metal. A tank. And that's what he does best, and what he should do to aid his teammates in battle. He should protect his team and bots from harm, and prevent the enemy bots from reaching friendly turrets, sacrificing as much health as necessary and wise. What is awesome about playing Clunk? What's the thing that makes him fun to choose? First of all, you don't usually have to run. Your shots force the enemies either to stay back and evade, or eat the damage in an effort to overpower them. An effort that is most of the time futile, if not suicidal. At short range, you can use Bite to gain health and Explode to trade it for massive area damage. Playing Clunk is not all roses, however. You cannot dive in and out of action easily, and your damage per second output is limited. Plus, your shots are quite easily avoidable, so you can't really hunt anyone down. And now for the second Awesomenaut, which is Froggy G.
Make some noise for the frog!
Ah, Froggy G, the rapping frog gangster. In the right hands, this amphibian thug can be quite a menace, constantly harassing you and your boss, always catching up to you when you desperately want to get away, and always staying out of reach when you'd wish to get your hands on him. Agility is what he is all about. When it comes to his physical attributes, Froggy's health is decent, but nothing to write home about. Also, he cannot double jump, and his regular jump isn't all that impressive. His weapon is a high-caliber fish that gushes out liquids at a very fast rate, dealing small amounts of damage very frequently. His first ability is called Dash and does a multitude of things at once. It shields the frog from damage, deals some itself, stuns, and allows Froggy to pass through enemies and bots alike. The remaining ability is Whirlpool, which deals area damage to everything that comes in direct contact with Froggy. Note that he cannot shoot while transformed into this raging torrent. With one ability that makes enemies want to stay away and another that allows you to close or put more distance between you and your target, it shouldn't be surprising that while your accuracy with the fish gun dictates to a degree how much damage you are going to dish out most of the time, it's the timing at which you utilize your skills that is the deciding factor in most encounters. Will you be able to run away? Or are you going to be stuck between a rock and a hard place? Can you hunt this guy down? Or is he going to get back to his base safely? It all depends on how you manage your cooldowns. Curiously enough, both of your skills can be customized for offense or defense, but that won't help if you get stuck with a few seconds left to wait, desperately mashing the button to no avail. What is awesome about him? First of all, I dare say how independent from the environment he is. Since he can dash right through enemies, he cannot be flanked. He will rip through any blockade and ride off into the sunset. He's also excellent to have around since his dash also stuns enemies, so your teammates can capitalize on that by surrounding them or finishing them off. The Whirlpool is excellent for killing clustered bots, and his gun can be upgraded in many ways, though its main purpose will always be softening the enemies up. On the flip side, Froggy can almost never quite stand his ground. He can get some shots in and retreat, rinse and repeat. He can take down already wounded opponents, but aside from extremely careless players, he will not be able to deal 100% of the damage. He needs his team. I guess since he's such a gangster, you could say that he needs his gang, and he can be an invaluable asset. He excels at killing bots due to his high rate of fire on his fish and his amazing mobility, but falters in down and dirty direct confrontations. He's all about the hit and run, guerrilla tactics.
You are totally going down!
This my pump. I ain't going nowhere.
Our third hero is Yuri, which also serves as a nice litmus test. Did that sound Russian or Japanese to you? Well, the correct answer should be quite obvious by now. Yuri is a Russian monkey with enhanced cognitive skills, strapped to a jetpack. At his scariest, he can be a minefield maker and a living fortress. He will slow your attacks and movement down while frying you with his laser, or run away and dare you to step into his booby-trapped bushes, corridors, or whichever area he has covered in dormant death. When it comes to movement, Yuri acts unlike any other character due to the simple fact that his jetpack allows him to suspend himself at the desired altitude and remain there indefinitely. He can choose to walk, of course, but this is rarely beneficial. His primary weapon is a laser, which forces him to remain stationary while fired and, as is common internet knowledge, needs to be charged up before it can be unleashed at full power. Note that any damage received will reset the charge and even entirely disable the jetpack for a brief moment, causing Yuri to plummet to the ground. Fortunately, it doesn't have to be this way. Here are his two abilities. First of all, the mines. The mines. The mines! They do take some time to deploy, but are indestructible unless something either goes through them or the expiration time is reached. You can replace them though, keeping a spot constantly blocked. You can drop them on your opponent's head, you can do all sorts of things with them. You cannot be firing a laser while deploying them, though unlike it, they can be unleashed while moving. Your second ability is Time Warp, a delightful little bubble that slows down projectiles, enemies and enemy bots alike. It can be used to cut off someone's path of escape, though it usually only proves successful if your team capitalizes on it. One notion that is extremely handy when thinking about Yuri is area control. Going through a minefield or his slowing bubble or both are arduous tasks. You need to find the right places to lay mines in though, a right area. Bushes are amazing. When there's a Yuri on the field, people are hesitant to enter them since you can't see what's inside without entering them though. You can peek in and won't die unless there's a lot of mines on that very edge. Area control is not only about the area but also the control itself. When you attack with the laser, you have to know when to stand your ground and when to turn tail and run. The longer you stay, the more powerful your laser becomes, but the closer the enemies can get to you, even with the bubble. You have to be sure you'll eliminate them before dying, especially if you're going to use the bubble while charging the weapon instead of saving it for retreat. On the other hand, the enemies also need to keep this in mind when attacking Yuri. It's fight or flight at its finest. What is awesome about playing Yuri? They can never get to you if you don't want them to. You can block their way and blow up their butts, collect solar remotely via the laser, slow the enemies down so the team can get them. You have the ultimate freedom of movement with your jetpack and the best form of movement discouragement in the indestructible mines. On the other hand, you are a frail monkey with a jetpack. If they do get to you and you have all the means to prevent that from happening, if they do, you're dead. You can at best survive enough damage to get to safety, assuming you start to run immediately as you begin receiving it. In most cases, you shouldn't even wait that long. Your task is sealing off areas, stopping retreat attempts and finding smart places to locate your weak self at. Just as Froggy is all about timing, Yuri is all about placement. Now let's move on to Lone Star. I get giddy simply thinking about him. Sheriff Lone Star is an authority figure for a good reason. He will bring you to justice, or more likely he will simply bring you down. If you are dealing with a competent Lone Star, you will soon learn to hate his pistol. And as peer reviews suggest, there are valid reasons for such antipathy. Since his pistol could be, at times, quite accurately, described as, well, pretty nasty. Now that I've caught your interest, let's get down to details. His health is mediocre, his speed is decent at best, and when it comes to jumping, the little rockets mounted in his cowboy boots allow him to perform a double jump, or when upgraded, even a triple jump. His primary weapon is a pistol that deals considerable damage in rapid fire bursts. The projectiles themselves are quite speedy, though their range is limited. Also, they travel in a straight line. Overall, in the right hands, we're dealing with a real Deathbringer here. His primary ability is Dynamite, which he can heave for a short distance, 2 or 3 sticks at a time in an arc, dealing explosive area of effect damage to everything caught in the blast. His second ability is the Bull, a hologram made of hard light, which can push enemies away when used defensively, or trap them against a wall or even a turret when utilized for offense. It can clear mines, push bots away and tank turret damage. Even though Lone Star is not extremely mobile himself, his abilities are all about movement, more accurately forcing movement. The Bull will push Awesomenauts in a given direction, the Dynamite will either damage them or force them to relocate, which is something you can use to your advantage. Whenever possible, try to drop it where they want to be, not where they are, so that they will have to either forsake desired movement or suffer the damage. You don't want them too close to yourself though, so always try to keep them at maximum range of your pistol. If they advance, fall back. If they retreat, pursue. What is awesome about playing Lone Star? Well, let me just show you. Actually, it was the blue team that has been wiped out, but you might have noticed that yourselves. On the flip side, you can neither tank much damage, mostly just enough to stay alive in most encounters, nor can you travel all that fast, which means that it's all too easy to get ambushed and dispatched before you can dish out the damage you'd want. Like the vigilant watcher that you are, you need to keep your eyes peeled and keep an eye out for escape paths. Fortunately, they can usually be easily accessed using the tools at your disposal. Oh, also your low mobility means that your enemies can easily avoid you or run away if necessary. And now that we're done with Lone Star, let's move on to Volta the Omniscient.
I am the brain of the operation.
I find his appearance endearing. As you probably know, there are basically 4 German archetypes in popular culture: the psychologist, the poet, the scientist, and the ruthless soldier. Since Volta sounds unequivocally German, I have understandably been trying to narrow his character down to one of the above, but to my pleasant surprise this has proven to be impossible. Rather, I found a quote alluding to something I have never in a million years expected to find in this game, namely German idealism. Most likely Immanuel Kant in particular. As far as this ambiguous kill taunt can suggest anyway. Speaking of appearances, and this is a perfectly valid sake by the way, speaking of appearances, our hero is a robotized brain in a jar. What's hilarious about this situation is that brains in a jar are a shorthand for a thought experiment in philosophy dealing with the existence of the external world. In a nutshell, if you can feed a brain impulses that would result in it perceiving a world, including sights, sounds, tastes and so forth, how can we be sure that we are not ourselves a disembodied brain trapped in a lab somewhere? Unfortunately, this cannot be disproven. Back to my beloved Awesomenaut though. What is he like from an outside perspective? What does one feel when dealing with a well-played floating German brain? Hopelessness is my bet. A competent Volta will keep healing up all the damage you dish out, making it seemingly pointless to assault him and his teammates. Try to hunt him down and you will soon be running circles in his orb of pain, while his faithful bots keep blasting tiny holes in you. Let's get down to his mechanics. Volta's health is pretty low, his mobility decent enough to lull you into a false sense of security, low enough to get you killed. While in the air he can suspend himself and float, very gently descending towards the ground. His basic attack has been replaced with a healing ability, a healing wave, which he sprinkles in a line in the direction of choice. Anything this wave touches gets healed and receives a small heal over time to boot. Works on both Awesomenauts and bots and provides a steady source of income for the healer, giving him an amount of solid proportional to the hit points he restored. His first ability is a damage dealing one. He can summon drones which will float around him, shooting at random targets until he decides to set them to self-destruct, at which point they will chase a single enemy down and detonate for a bit of area of effect damage. They are tiny and weak, but replenishable. The second ability provides even more healing. The Heal Bot is a structure which dispenses its energy in a circle, remaining stationary and vulnerable to enemy attacks. It times out after a short while, but lends a helping hand in the revitalizing efforts, as well as provides the primary means of restoring the health of Voltar, who predictably cannot use the healing wave on himself. Health is a prized commodity. People want to have as much of it as possible, or at the very least to keep it above zero. Though there are various other ways of replenishing it, having a dedicated healer, Voltar, on one's team is the most convenient. Killing creeps or picking up medpacks forces one to sidetrack. Going back to the base wastes precious time and leaves allies alone, turrets undefended. Voltar can follow you around and keep you on your feet effortlessly. However, this arrangement can only work as long as the healer is alive and, more broadly speaking, safe. Since Voltar's means of repelling opponents are extremely limited, as is his health and ability to restore it, he needs to be kept safe. He needs to be able to hide behind either a turret or someone's back. Once out in the open, the threat of a flank is constantly looming, so the protection his teammates offer can seem tenuous. As such, Voltar is tethered in space and time. At any given moment he needs to be able to run back to the base or hide in a remote spot long enough to be able to teleport back home. Similarly, his teammates are tethered to him, dependent on his healing to get by. I like to call this the invisible leash. Why would anyone want to play him? I can promise you one thing. Getting kills with him is about 3 times more exciting and equally as humiliating for the opponents. That's just the cherry on the top though. The true calling of our medic is to provide the support his team needs and deserves. Think of it this way, the difference between using him and not is the difference between having a dedicated healer on your team or playing without one. It does make a difference for everyone involved. Keep in mind though that support characters are only as good as the characters they are supporting. This is true for Voltar more so than for any other hero in this game. While you can be generally helpful and can alter the flow of the lanes by replenishing the health of the bots, the difference between the team being an unstoppable force that is immediately back to full health once the enemy leaves it alone for 10 seconds and a disorganized mess of 2 DPSs and a tag-along weakling is in teamwork. You have to coordinate your efforts and telegraph your plans clearly. In most cases, I would advise to follow whatever the hell the healer thinks is the best course of action. If it's a good one, you're going to be smoothly working towards a pleasant victory. If it's bad, you're still better off following it through than trying to 2v3 the enemy team in hope that it will work out. It never does. Oh, if a medic screams defend, it usually means I'm going back to the base now, which means that I will no longer be healing you. This warm feeling of invincibility you currently have will no longer be appropriate, so you can either fall back and try your best to stay alive for the few seconds I will be missing, or stay, get stranded and killed off by the enemy team, making our task harder by what is commonly called feeding. Oh, one final remark, a litmus test for whether Voltar is for you, herding bots. If helping the little buggers march along and overcome their differently colored counterparts seems useful or even fun to you rather than monotonous and boring, you may find playing this class immensely rewarding as it requires patience and diligence. Oh, and here in this final bit of footage, you can see me use my trusty healing bot as a killing bot. And now that we're done with Voltar the Omniscient, let's move on to Leon the Chameleon. Apart from being a chameleon, Leon sounds distinctly French. When facing him, paranoia will swiftly overtake you, as he could always be there, hiding in the shadows, ready to strike when you're low on health. He'll uncloak, slash at you with his energy sword, and when you try to run, he'll pull you back with his tongue to finish you off. All he needs in order to hack you to pieces is to get close enough, and you can hardly get away from what you cannot see and what can grab onto and drag you back to itself. To balance things out, Leon has very little health and his mobility is limited, both horizontally and vertically. He can only master a single low jump, lower than that of Froggy, no double jumping like Lone Star, no floating, no jetpack, nothing. It's still more than enough. His attack is the aforementioned energy sword Slash. As such, it has very short range but deals damage fast and hard. As his first ability, Leon can use his tongue to damage everything in its path, as well as to pull any hero unlucky enough to get caught by it. The remaining ability is Stealth. Leon can make himself invisible for as long as he wants, dropping a low health decoy to confuse his opponents. Attacking, teleporting, and using his tongue breaks the invisibility. Leon is all about surprises and ambushes, more precisely about suddenly putting his opponents in situations they were not expecting, whether pulled into the range of a turret or attacked out of nowhere. The psychological factor is almost as important as the situation itself. That being said, it can be argued that Leon's presence on the battlefield may be simply accounted for. People may expect everything he can do so as not to get caught by surprise. This, however, results in the paranoia I've initially mentioned. You never know when or where the omnipresent threat will materialize itself, and it is impossible to protect yourself against everything you can imagine, provided your imagination is rich enough. By simply being Leon, you alter how map awareness works for the enemy team. Some things taken for granted no longer apply. For instance, if one lane is open, all of its turrets destroyed, normally the defending team could traverse it safely in an attempt to quickly even things out by taking the enemy turrets down as well. This works because the enemy team has two choices: either attack the other lane, to which you can react by defending it, or to walk through the one where the turrets are down, which means they will have to go through your team before they get to the drill. With Leon on the field, this no longer applies, as he can sneak behind the backs of everyone and assault the drill directly, disappearing if spotted. Without Leon, people with low health can still kill bots and linger in remote spots on the battlefield, provided they can retreat once they spot a threat at the edge of their vision. With Leon, however, they would make easy prey, making such behavior extremely unwise. With the ability to drastically change the paradigm of the game comes, of course, a cost. You can't really tank damage, so you can't really escort bots unless backed up by your team. You can't face multiple opponents at once and hope to survive, since your health and mobility are low. You must either wait for them to disband, or tear the team asunder and quickly strike at an isolated individual with all your lizard ferocity. In summary, Leon is not scary when you know where he is and can plan ahead to either avoid or dispatch him. He is scary when he puts you in unexpected situations, as previously mentioned. Now that we're done with him, let's switch gears a lot by discussing Derpal Zork.
Good morning, Mr. Zork.
Derpal Zork is a mentally disabled, cat-loving son of a millionaire. This last part has proven to be both a blessing and a curse for poor Derpal. Whether he helps the Awesomenauts win the war or dies on the battlefield, his father will be relieved. That's the bad part of the deal. He's on a suicide mission. The good news is his combat walker is a versatile machine with a custom tweaked version of the voice recognition software office suite called Suzy. Inseparable from his imposing vehicle, Derpal roams the battlefield, flooding the area with ferocious bouncing kittens that will maim you with their cute little claws unless you end up dying to his nuclear blob or machine gun. Of course you can try to run, but if you happen to fall into one of his traps, you are unlikely to ever get out alive. Playing as Deadpool, you get a decent amount of life and are quite heavy, so you can push everything around relatively easily. Your rocket boosters are similar to those of Clunk, although feel a little less inert and clunky. In other words, you're a bit faster and more maneuverable, but have less health than Clunk. A trade-off you should not mind all that much. Your weapon are holographic kittens. Yes, your primary weapon is an endless stream of cats. Cats bounce off of glass, are heavily affected by gravity, but can nevertheless be propelled quite a distance before they disappear or hurt something. The constant meowing can either feel bizarre or soothing at first, but you'll get used to it either way. Your first ability, it's a trap! It ensnares anyone and anything stupid enough to walk into it, including enemy bots, bulls and heroes. An excellent method of area denial and a potential lifesaver, or a cruel way of cutting off the enemy's way of escape. The remaining ability is Siege Mode. Once you switch into it, you can fire in a straight line in a rapid fashion over a long distance and even launch nukes. Huge but slow moving area effect balls of pain instead of setting traps. The downside, you are completely stationary while it is engaged, and switching between modes cannot be done immediately, but it's on a cooldown. The cooldown nowadays is extremely low, and I suspect it will remain this way for quite a while. To best describe what the Deadpool creates on the battlefield, I would use the term perimeter. Setting traps around and becoming a nuke launching stationary dispenser of death allows Deadpool to entrench himself in positions you would prefer not to break. Unlike Yuri, he can dish out plenty of damage even while under attack, and has enough health to survive most casual attempts at killing him. When supported by his team, he can be virtually inapproachable, though you can usually sidestep him, remembering that he will have to change modes eventually, and that is usually a great time to strike, before he's ready or after he's done. Even with low cooldown and siege mode, Deadpool is vulnerable when he does not have his traps set up, is trying to get in or out of siege mode, in other words, has not yet established a defense for himself and his team. The main appeal of Deadpool lies in his ability to constantly barrage the opposing team with something: cats, bullets, nukes, and an elaborate set of traps. It's not always about hitting anything, though that is a nice bonus. Churning this stuff out at a ridiculous rate is what makes Deadpool awesome. You can get a few kills, you can turn into a tank, blow stuff up with nukes, nab the enemies for your team to kill, riddle the enemy heroes with bullets, all the while taking a bit of punishment yourself and walking it off like it's no big deal. It's pure unadulterated fun. Unfortunately, Deadpool is slow in more than one way. When he gets places, he can usually get something done, assuming it's not completely ludicrous. Well, okay, in some circumstances it can be completely ludicrous and it will still work. Back to the point, getting from point A to point B can be hazardous. Even with copious amounts of health, you cannot let yourself be ambushed in a vulnerable state, nor dash into enemy territory for whatever reason, or successfully chase after fleeing enemies. You need to take life one step at a time, focus on the here and the now. That is to say, know where you are going and what you are planning to accomplish, and then have fun doing it. But do not attempt to switch tasks too often. Intricate plans of sabotage are best left to others. You just go where you are needed and blast things. That's what Deadpool would like, even though he likely has ADD and is not capable of long-term thinking. Enough with Deadpool, let's discuss someone hella more jive. Coco-Nebulian.
Tubular!
Coco is a hip, tentacle-hurt space surfer girl possessing both psionic powers and a deeply peculiar vocabulary. She intersperses her elocutions gratuitously with the word like and remains bubbly even through the worst of times. Some may find her obnoxious and crass, I find her adorable. Don't be fooled by appearances, or you shall quickly learn to regret it. In fact, deception is one of her greatest weapons. Her lightning bolts can reach you where you'd otherwise feel safe. Her frail hands will fry you into a crisp if you get close enough. Her sparkling blaze will engulf you in a web of debilitating pain. You will never be able to catch her, but she'll have an easy time reaching you. Make no mistake, she is as deadly as she is cute. Coco is pretty swift, but most importantly flexible. I'd even say that her movement is graceful. There are caveats to that. When she stops, she actually continues sliding for a while, making her feel very slippery. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it simply takes getting used to. Also, when using her main attack, her movement becomes restricted to the direction she is facing. Coupled with the previous fact, this makes attacking either quite a commitment or a matter of wiggling back and forth. This can be particularly awkward when attacking turrets and needing to readjust to not stand in front of bots. Her basic attack channels her psionic energies into a destructive wave emanating from her fingertips and stretching not too far away. The relatively short range is made up for by the fact that her attack pierces through targets, or more precisely, simply damages everything it engulfs. This is particularly useful against droids since they tend to cluster up, but against other knots it can be tricky and risky to use. Fortunately, her first ability is a ranged one. Quite a powerful one to boot. It's Ball Lightning. It travels in a line, passing through everything in its path, including turrets, Awesomenauts and terrain, until it gets manually detonated, at which point it explodes in a decent radius, dealing damage and knocking everything back. Her second ability is Blaze. It leaves a series of sparkles behind her hoverboard. They damage and slow down everything that walks into them. As you might imagine, this can be used both defensively and offensively. There is a certain duality in Coco. She needs enemies close to her to attack them and can knock them in her own direction with the ball, but she also needs space and time to heal up. She is very fragile. When things get hard, she can push people away with the ball, as well as deter any pursuers with a blazing trail of pain and regret. Want to run after me? Say hello to electricity, jackass. Yeah, go right ahead. I want you to wade through that stuff. She can also paint a beautiful wall to force people either away from it or to walk through it, slowing them down until she can have her way with them. Coco is all about zoning people. Why is she awesome to play? When you run in, you can easily get out. Want to push your enemies closer? Go ahead. Want to push them away? No problem. You can fly in circles of blaze or get out, with no easy way to be followed. You set the pace, you make the rules others have to abide by. You're psionic, but don't need mind control to force behavior, as shown here. At worst, you'll give them a choice between changing their plans, running away, or both. At best, between your sizzling hands, a shockwave of pain, and a makeshift barbed wire electric fence. There is no escaping her. The other side of the coin is that since Coco relies so heavily on deception, careful planning and making adjustments based on every little detail are necessary. unless she can spin the situation in her favor. She is weak and relatively helpless. Her lightning bolts can be avoided. The blaze trail can simply be not stepped into. And by shoving DPS down her throat, you can prevent her from even hoping to get into melee range. She is the very opposite of Delpo. All finesse and no brute force to back it up. With Coco out of the picture, we can now focus on the most ferocious beast the world of Awesomenauts has known so far. Gnaw! Gnaw is an animal. A Scroggle to be precise. He's neither big enough to be outright imposing and terrifying, nor is he small enough to be dismissed. No, he's just right. Endowed with some limited capacity for lucid thought and communication, this beast can even be considered cunning. He hunts in a way some smaller predators are known for, dealing damage in small bursts, running away before his target can mangle him with a mighty blow, then returning once its back is turned. At some point the bloodlust becomes too heavy, and teeth can finally safely sink into what will never again threaten to hit back. On top of it, even if he stops biting you, you are far from safe. Sick from infections, you'll be unable to teleport back to base, and sometimes may simply die on your way, desperately trying to reach a source of healing before it is too late. Gnaw is a defensive knot, endowed with a decent health bar and a solid, though not overly impressive, jump. His primary attack, fittingly enough, is a bite. It requires melee range, but allows him to devour everything he wraps his mouth around, one chunk at a time. His first ability is Acid Spit. It allows him to hurl 2 globs of noxious goo that apply a nasty damage over time to anything that touches them. Even once the substance hits the ground, it remains toxic, discouraging the enemy team from being anywhere near it. The second ability allows Gnaw to deploy up to 4 weedlings. These tiny plant-like organisms remain stationary and pepper all enemies with fuzzy balls of pain. To be able to spit weedlings out, Gnaw first needs to gorge himself on enough matter, which he accomplishes with his primary attack. Additionally, placing weedlings deals area of effect damage. Gnaw can turn any area into a garden of pain by planting his weedlings there. They may be weak, but they will stay where he puts them, until they are destroyed or he places the 5th one, at which point the earliest one dies. They never go away on their own. They can kill creeps, block bots, distract turrets and chip away the Awesomenauts. Unlike mines, weedlings cannot be simply walked through, which never was a good idea with mines anyway, so they obstruct movement as well as deal damage. His acidic spit can prevent one from teleporting, and is generally unpleasant, as the powers of goo will usually at the very least be stepped into by bots, damaging them significantly. Gnaw is the only knot that can control an area without physically being there to maintain said control. Of course, left unattended, the weedlings will get killed by savvy players and the goo does disappear rather quickly. But if you are in separate places, they need to be away from you while taking care of those things, so you can happily chew on enemy bots or push a given lane. They cannot be in 2 places at once, while you, to a degree, can. Gnaw is a territorial beast. This savage creature haunts the nightmares of his enemies, daring them to step into his twisted garden, or into a burning pile of regurgitated matter. He will happily pounce to deal the initial damage and let you die escaping. There's no trespassing around this guard dog. Let me show you why. On the other hand, Gnaw is a defensive mod, and it shows. If he overextends and gets himself stranded away from turrets, weedlings, teammates with only his sharp teeth and a portion or 2 of acid, he will get put down like the sick puppy he is. You can tell people apart on your own ground, but until a foothold is established, you should focus on scaring the enemies away, not engaging in straight fights. The beast we're talking about is dirty and should fight as such as well.